I feel like we should have patriotic music playing in
We
the background.
should. We need like a John Sousa march or something. Something that's great for the 4th of July, Memorial Day, summertime picnic. This is our quilt of the week. Tammy made this. I should say hello. I should turn it around so that it's, I'll put it in the background. Here we go. There we are. Oh, there it is. Hello, everybody. It's Cathy from Quilt Beginnings in Columbus, Ohio. And I'm back at Facebook Fun at 4. So good to see you guys, seeing everybody coming on. I don't know if you guys remember the Constance fabric, or the Constance quilt, rather. You're going to grab my pattern, Katie? It's back behind here. Oh, God. It's in the chair. There we go. There we go. There it is. So this was a super popular pattern that we did in the in this actually a year ago. Oh my gosh, a year ago when we were quarantining at the very beginning, and we did only curbside pickup. We did this pattern, and Julie saw. Let me turn it around again. I'm going to flip you one more time. Not Julie. Tammy saw this fabric, and she thought these fireworks would be great to use as a focus fabric. Aren't they fun? So it comes in 4 different colors, the focus fabric. There's the red, the tan, the navy. And then we picked some colors with it. It's hard to back up enough to get the whole picture. It's a pretty big size quilt, actually. But anyway, this is just the lap size, actually, and it ends up being, let me check the pattern really quick, ends up being 76 by 93, nice size. We did 2 different kits. We did a kit that includes all of the fabric and the background and the pattern, and that is $129, I believe. It has the background in it, and the pattern is $129. A lot of you got that pattern already, and some of you have backgrounds at home, so we also kitted it with just the focus fabrics, the 12 different fabrics you need to actually make it. It's the 4 fireworks plus kind of a grungy, this fabric here, kind of a grungy solid color, and then a matching star with it. And that's what we used as the coordinates. That one is $72 if you already, $72.95 if you want to use your own background and you already have the pattern. So hello, everybody. It's fun to see you, saying hi. Good to see you all. I know I love her use of the Liberty Lane, too. Tammy had a great eye. As soon as she said it, I was like, Constance is the perfect pattern for that. So hello, everyone. Okay, so I'm going to flip myself back around, and I'm going to I'm going to do it this way. Hand it to Katie.
Whoop, don't get dizzy.
Oh, but do we want to flip it so that you can see? You're good?
I think we're good.
Okay. All right. So I've been having a lot of customers call me over the phone and say, my machine is skipping stitches, or my thread keeps breaking, or I'm getting looping on the back of my fabric, and they don't want to bring it in and have us have our service department repair it. And so instead, I talk them through some really basic troubleshooting. And I did it with someone this morning, and I thought, I did this Facebook topic about a year ago, and I thought I would do it again because it's really basic stuff. And it doesn't matter whether you have a top-of-the-line sewing machine or if you have a brand new introductory sewing machine. The functionality is the same. Joyce says it's hard for me to see, or it's hard to hear, rather.
Oh.
So I wonder if we need to...
well, sure.
Let's flip it like that, and then I'll talk this way. Okay. But it does make it harder when we go the other way. All right. Yeah, we're still trying to get these microphones.
So
trying to get this microphone.
Are we going to be looking at this machine?
Yes, we're going to be looking at the machine, and that will work just great. So whether you're using a very beginning baby machine, or whether, actually both of these are baby beginning machines, the concepts that I'm going to teach you or talk about are exactly the same no matter what machine you have. So the very first thing is when you start skipping stitches or when you start having looping or something that's going on with the machine, very first thing is you want to check and just change a needle. Sometimes people say, as soon as I changed my needle, that's when I started having problems. And one of the biggest mistakes about changing needles is that the needle doesn't get inserted all the way up in the needle. The shank doesn't get all the way up into the machine. It feels like it's up. You tighten it down. It feels like it's secure. And you start stitching and you get irregular stitching. You either get skip stitches or the thread breaks or the needle threader doesn't work. All of those are indicators that you may not have that needle all the way in. And what I would do is just loosen the screw again, push it up one more time into the needle holder, and then re-snug it down. If you still have the exact same problems, I actually would even take that needle, discard it, and put a new needle in. Sometimes needles have a little burr on them, they get a deflected end, something happens to that needle that makes it not work right. So that's a really, really, really simple thing to do. Sometimes people bring their machines into the shop, and that's all we do. We change the needle, and now they're back running full tilt again. So if it's something you can do at home that's really simple, we'd like you to do that rather than get frustrated and have to bring it in here. Okay, so needles are number one. The 80-20, just a regular universal 80-20 is probably the one that I use more than anything. The 80 has a really nice size eye in the needle so that when you're going to thread it, it's easy for you to, actually for your needle threader to get into that eye of the needle. If you use anything smaller than an 80, if you start using something like a 70 or something that's smaller, it's hard for an automatic needle threader to actually get into the eye of the needle. So they're really manufactured to be for 80 or 90 needles rather than a 70 or a 65. You're getting really small for your automatic needle threader. So if your needle threader isn't working, try using a larger needle, an 80 or a 90, and see if it works then, because that's how they're engineered. A very tiny little hook, it's just a little tiny hook, goes into the eye of the needle. So here's my needle, it goes into the eye of the needle, it grabs the thread and pulls it back through. That eye is so small that if that little tiny hook bumps into the sides, either this like bumps into the sides of the needle, then it's going to deflect that little hook and bend it, and then your needle thread is not going to work anymore.
And then you'll be sad.
And then you'll be sad. So it's really important the needle is all the way up, and that when you put your needle threader, when you go to use your needle threader, that you're not pushing too hard down on it and forcing it to hit a side of the needle. Because once they're bent, they really then don't work well again, and you'll be frustrated. So don't want that. Okay. The next thing is when we go to, let's talk about the bobbin first. So all of your bobbins basically have the same way of going into your sewing machine. They all need to do a backtrack. So when you go to put your bobbin in your bobbin case, or your bobbin into its bobbin case, the thread needs to come from around the top and come out. Can you guys see that? I think you can see it there. There we go. See, here's my thread coming off the top of my needle. What I'm thinking about is that there's always a hook that's over here, and it needs to make a U-turn. So the thread comes off the top, it does a U-turn like this to come back out of the machine. A lot of your machines will actually have that written on the spool, on the lid for you, so you can see it comes off from the top and it does a U-turn to go into the bobbin area. So here it is coming off the top looking just like that, and then it does a U-turn to go into the machine. If you put the bobbin in this way, where the thread comes straight off and doesn't do a U-turn, it's really hard for the stitch to get formed properly, and you'll find a lot of skipping stitches. Sometimes, again, it's as simple as making sure you have it flipped this way so the bobbin comes off the top. When it goes into the bobbin unit, I'm going to go ahead and drop it in. I'm going to drop it in. Here's my thread coming off the top. It's going to come down to the bottom. I'm going to hold my bobbin so it doesn't keep spinning. I'm going to click back in, and I hear a little click right there. And now I'm going to follow the arrow, go around and around. And there we go. That's really important that you have a little click when you come into this top area here, because that's where your tension is kept on your bobbin, the bobbin itself. The bobbin thread is normally behaves when you notice loops on the back of the underneath of your sewing. A lot of people think that it's the bobbin that's the problem, and in reality it's the upper thread. If the bobbin isn't in the tension, it's going to show up on the top because there's going to be too much bobbin thread and it's going to pull up to the top. So if there's too much thread on the top, you need to reseat your bobbin. If there's too much thread on the bottom, you need to reseat the top thread. And we're going to go through that in a second. Okay, so there's our bobbin. All right, once our bobbin is in, let's go up to the top of the machine. And again, this is true for most of the machines. They're going to have a very similar threading path. It may not be exactly the same, but it's going to be really similar. The first thing you need to notice is how your thread is wound on the spool. So let me show you one that's really obvious. This is cross wound, so I'm going to show you two different ways. So here's one that is actually wound around the spool, and you can see there's no crossing or Xing going on. It's just straight around the spool. This one, the thread needs to pull off this way, where it's unwinding the same way that it goes on. So you're going to pull it off straight. When a thread is cross wound, like an Aurifil, so let's look at this one, and you can see how it goes this way and this way on the spool. It makes like little X's on the spool. Let me see if there's another one that's easier to see. This one might be, actually this variegated's easy to see. So you can really see that it's cross-wound. The threads aren't going circularly, they're zigzagging back and forth across each other. So it's a cross-wound. This thread needs to be horizontal. It needs to pull off the spool the same way it's put on, so it's going to pull off horizontally like this. The spool is not spinning. You don't want to pull it off like this where you make the spool spin. Okay? That's really important because if you've ever played with a rope and you've flipped it around and flipped it around, and then you flip it around and flip it around, and then it turns into a corkscrew. So when you're sewing and you're not pulling your thread off the spool the proper way, it turns into corkscrews, and then it starts breaking threads, and it gets really frustrating. So you want to make sure if it's cross wound, it's horizontal, and if it's wrapped thread, you want to make sure you're vertical. A lot of machines like this don't look like they come with a horizontal and a vertical spool pin. A lot of them look like they just come with the horizontal, but you will often find in your toolkit this little device here. And when you have a device like this, there's often a hole somewhere on the top of your machine. So in this one, it's a little square peggy thing, and it goes in here. This is my vertical spill holder. Over on this machine, it has a little bit different look. It has this look, it has a little pin, and it happens to be in the front of the machine, so it would go here. So usually you can find a hole somewhere on top. Some of them have one that goes actually over your bobbin winder. I have seen that before. And some of them have them folded down in the back, and they actually lift up and go vertical. So these two happen to have portable pegs that just go into holes on the top of their machine, but you should be able to find a vertical spool holder somewhere on your machine. If you don't have one, the very last option is to go ahead and invest in something like this, which is an external thread stand. And what it allows it to do is it allows that thread to sit down here and come up as it's supposed to, so the thread is not spinning. That cross-wound thread is still pulling off the end of the thread like you want it to, on the end of the spool like you want it to. So this is your, this device is also really good if you're doing a lot of embroidery and you're having some trouble with specialty threads. This is a nice device to have because it gives the thread some time to relax. It comes up to this top part, then comes over to your machine. It gives the thread a little bit of time to relax before it actually gets down into the thread paths of the machine. You do want to be careful if you do use an external thread holder that the thread is not coming anywhere near your hand wheel. We have literally had people wind an entire spool of thread inside the hand wheel and be like, where did my spool of thread go? And when they bring it in for serve, and the machine stops working because it actually binds up the gears in there. And they'll bring it in, and we take the hand wheel off, and inside is an entire spool of thread.
An entire bird's nest.
Yeah, don't want that to happen to you. So do be careful that you don't get the thread.
So would
right
you
up
use
here.
the thread stand for straight wound also? Or
No.
just for cross wound?
No, only the cross wound. So when we have the straight wound, we always want to be vertical. We want to be on a vertical spool pin holder because we want the spool to spin. So see how it's spinning when I pull it off? When we're on this one, the spool stands still. The spool does not spin. It pulls straight off the top. So cross wound, you want it to not spin the spool, and wrapped thread, you want it to spin the spool. It goes on the same way it comes off. Okay? And that really makes a big difference. It's surprising how these little things make a really big difference, but they do. Okay, so now we're going to thread the machine, and the next thing that's really important is that your foot has to be up. This is true of any presser foot. So the foot is down. When the foot is down, your tension discs, which are up here, lock into position. And sometimes you can see them, sometimes they're inside of the machine, but this little device right here is fixed in space. It doesn't want to wiggle. When I lift my foot up, it opens up my tension discs, and see how much play I have in there now. So now my tension discs are fully opened. It's like having cymbals. I don't know if you can see this. Having cymbals, and the cymbals are kind of like this. When the foot is up, they're open. When the foot is closed, they're closed. So you may get the thread into the outside rim of the cymbals, but it doesn't get fully down into that tension disc. So it may start out stitching okay, then you stitch a little bit, and all of a sudden you've got looping on the bottom. It's actually worked its way out of the tension disc. So make sure that your foot is all the way up when you go to thread. I'm going to use this Orville thread. I'm just going to put it on horizontal because it's a cross-wound thread. You can use a spool cap. A lot of times when I'm sewing, I don't even use a spool cap because it's surprising spool caps can cause you sometimes more trouble than give you benefit. The biggest thing that happens with spool caps is when you put them on, and they can go on, the Orvilles, they can go on like this and go into the inside of the thread this way. But what happens sometimes is people leave a little bit of a gap, or they put them on backwards. So they put it on like this. It leaves a little bit of a gap here. Let me just make a gap. Whoop, a little bit of a gap. A little bit of gap, and then the thread actually falls down into that gap and tangles. And it'll actually catch the thread or bind the thread, and that will cause thread to break. So I oftentimes, when I'm sewing with a horizontal spool pin, I don't even put a spool cap on it. It's surprising people didn't know you can do that, but it creates less problems. Every once in a while, it will want to pull the spool off, but usually the thread just comes off really naturally. Doesn't have any problem. Okay, so we're going to go through our little tension disc up here. A lot of them have pre-tension discs at the beginning, and some of them have some kind of guide here at the back. This is where my tension discs are, and I want my foot up so my tension discs are free. There's no tension on my thread. We usually go down and around. This is the next part that needs consideration. So this is the take-up lever. This is the thing that when you turn your hand wheel, so let me just back up. I'm going to turn my hand wheel. It goes up and down with my needle. We want our take-up lever to be in the total top position. If you have a mechanical machine that isn't using a needle up and a needle down, and you have to be responsible for where this take-up lever stops, if you stop with it down here, or even part way back up, the needle may be up out of the thread down here. The needle is up, but the take-up lever is still in the midway position. It is not going to be happy when you go to thread it, and when you start sewing again, it's going to end up breaking stitches on you. So we're going to have our take-up lever, all the way up at the top. And then we're going to come down to our needle, and this one does happen to have a little guide right before the needle and a little needle threader. So needle threaders come in all different shapes and sizes. This one is they have basically the same concept, has a little hook where I'm going to put my needle underneath the hook as I'm bringing the needle threader down. I'm going to push it straight down, and it's going to swing a hook into the eye of my needle, and it's going to let me thread my needle.
It's all about catching that tiny, tiny hook.
I know, that little hook plays a really important role. Now, if you notice, when my foot is still up, I don't really have any tension. You can see how easily I'm pulling my thread through my machine. When I put my foot down, you should feel a good resistance. Whoops, I put so much resistance, I broke my thread. Let's just back that off a little bit. Do that one more time. But you definitely want to feel that difference in tension between your foot up and your foot down.
And something that I learned recently, because I do this test all of the time when I thread my machine, I put my foot down and just double check that there is tension. Some embroidery machines, when they are in embroidery mode, will actually not even close that tension disc.
That's true. Good point.
And that can be a little bit of a trick. So just like Cathy was showing, right, there's plenty of movement. It's very easy to pull the thread when the foot is up. As soon as it goes down, there's going to be more tension on that thread. But with embroidery machines, just know that there may not be tension on the thread even with the foot down. You might have to go back to sewing just to check.
Or in your embroidery mode, what I do sometimes is take I advance by one stitch, and as soon as you advance one stitch, it now will close your tension disc for you. It's because it's going to a lot of times the embroidery machine is going to
move around in the hoop or move the hoop around, and it doesn't want to bind the thread, so it leaves the tension disc open until it takes that first stitch. So just advance it 1 stitch if you're not sure that you're in your tension disc properly, and you should be able to feel a change in tension.
Nice.
So
Okay, so we talked about the cross wound, the vertical, the horizontal, the foot up, the foot down. I just want to reinforce that when the looping is on the back of your machine, 9 times out of 10, it has to do with either the take-up lever or the tension disc. The thread has fallen out of the tension disc.
The back of the fabric.
Yes, on the back of the thread, so on the bottom side. So my recommendation is just take the thread out top and bottom.
a lot of people just rethread the needle. They don't pull it all the way back out of the machine, or they don't check their bobbin case. And a lot of times when you get looping on the bottom, it's caused by the upper thread, but it also causes issues in the bobbin case as well. So I would recommend taking the thread out, top and bottom, rethreading top and bottom, making sure you have a new needle, making sure your thread is running the right way, horizontal for cross wound, vertical for wrapped thread, and I think you'll have better success. So really, that was about it. I think, can you think of anything else they need for home troubleshooting?
Those are some good tips. That's what we walk through every time, every day.
We go through that same process really with you on the phone, and it's amazing how many of you are like, oh my gosh, that solved my problem. So anyway, I hope you all have great sewing, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Have a great day.